Biden's Department of Justice putting up a fight, refusing to comply with subpoenas for 4 different government attorneys involved in the criminal investigation of Hunter Biden.
The House Judiciary Committee says these subpoenas bring them closer to connecting Joe Biden to his son's business, but the DOJ says the subpoenas are unconstitutional and unjustified.
Joining us now, Chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer. Congressman, Chairman, good to see you. Tell us more about this fight, these subpoenas for these 4 attorneys and next steps for you.
Well, we're certainly going to do everything we can. We're in the phase of the investigation where we want to bring people in. We want to know about not just the crimes the Biden family's committed, but we also want to know about the deep state actors who were a part of the cover-up, because there's 2 components to this investigation. The component that my oversight committee is leading with respect to the financial crimes that the Bidens committed, the influence peddling, the fact that Joe Biden wasn't honest with the American people, the fact that we're proving every day that he did meet with all the people he said he never met with, that he did, in fact, benefit financially from his family's influence peddling schemes, and the fact that there are people within the government that knew about this. The Bidens were investigated by the Department of Justice. They were investigated by the FBI. They were investigated by the IRS. They were investigated by the Securities and Exchange Commission for years. But yet when it got time to ask Joe questions, then they were told to stand down. And what we want to do at the end of this investigation is not only list and refer the crimes the Bidens committed, but also identify the what I call the deep state actors in the government who were involved in the cover-up. And to do that, we need to bring people in. We need to ask them questions, and that's what we're fighting for with these subpoenas.
Now, Chairman Comer, not only some of the evidence has shown that they didn't want to allow interviews of Joe Biden, but also that Hunter Biden would have had millions of dollars of income that is a crime he didn't pay taxes on, and they let the statute of limitations at the Department of Justice run on those crimes. That doesn't happen to anybody. You owe them $100 and they come for you. The statute never runs when you owe money to the IRS. And are you inquiring as to whether there was undue influence as well on the prosecutors to let the statute of limitations run on Hunter Biden's charges?
Yeah, I mean, look, David Weiss was the guy who let the statute of limitations expire. And yet he was the one appointed by Merrick Garland to supposedly investigate the Bidens for criminal wrongdoing. I mean, give me a break. What a joke. The guy that allowed the statute of limitations to expire is the guy that we're supposed to defer to in this investigation. I mean, I'm not going to let that happen, because this guy's already proven, David Weiss, that he's soft on the Bidens, right? And the fact that Joe Biden campaigned on doubling the size of the IRS, the fact that Joe Biden says he wants to go after tax cheats, so he's going to need more federal employees in the IRS to go after tax cheats. Well, he doesn't need to look any further than his family if he wants to look at tax sheets, because not only did they not pay taxes on their taxable income that they had W-2s on, John, they also didn't report all these loans that they got in. We found millions of dollars in loans that Jim Biden and Hunter Biden took in that they've never paid a penny back on. And you're a financial services guy. You know, at what point are those loans income? And that's unpaid taxes. Then many of the influence peddling wires they got in through the shell companies, they used the shells to pay for basic living expenses like groceries. So they wrote those off as income, as business expenses, and they weren't. The 2 IRS whistleblowers testified these weren't legitimate business expenses. So I think we could make a strong case that both Hunter and Jim Biden owe millions more dollars to the IRS, and then Joe Biden, this $250,000 he got from his family that he's calling a loan repayment. I mean, that's taxable income as well, because there's no evidence that he actually made the loan. So, I mean, the financial crimes never end with this family.
You know what? The Department of Justice is not above the law either. They should come and testify in front of Congress. Hopefully you continue to push them. We've been grateful to watch your work. Congressman James Comer, thank you for joining us on The Bottom Line. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.